Hello and welcome to the Web Weavers. I'm your host, Sprinkles Nixon, and I figured I got this newspaper. It's called the xChronicles newspaper, and it has some very interesting articles in it. But I'd like to share this particular one, and I think I have another one for the other half of today's show. But this is about paranormal events that are witnessed by police. Okay, so police officers mostly have a tough time of things. They witness gruesome crime scenes. They have to deal with delivering bad news, and often they don't get the credit or thanks they may deserve after working long, tiring hours to solve cases. However, in some instances, police officers respond to an emergency call that comes across something totally different from what they are usually doing. Sometimes they don't even have to leave the station to experience some strange things. Okay, so we're going to give a countdown on starting at 10, and then we'll count down. But number 10 is about surveillance cameras and the figures within them. Officer Carl Romero was spending a relatively quiet Saturday evening on duty at the Espanola police station in New Mexico, and this was about 2014. Keeping an eye on the several surveillance cameras installed around the place, things were going well until he spotted something strange on one of the cameras pointed at the entryway to the station. Scrutinizing those on the camera, Romero easily thought that the bright white blob he was looking at must be an insect until he spied the legs below it. He realized then that it was looking at what he could only describe as a ghostly figure. Since the entryway to the police station is blocked off with a gate and secured with an alarm system, Romero knew it could not be a human figure that was showing up on the footage. He reported what he saw to his supervisor the next day. Most of them believed him. Some even came forward with their own scary experiences, saying that they often heard strange, unexplained noises in the building and had experienced weird sightings in the lobby as well. Romero relayed his story to the KOAT TV, saying that he believes in ghosts and thinks that that ghostly figure he saw may have something to do with unsolved murders that have taken place in the area over the years. I have a link here to follow up on this. It's www.youtube.com. It's QV6IPBB5CQO, and I'll post it in the room today. This one is this. Okay, Lieutenant Frank Murray, now retired, was one of these officers tasked with sifting through the rumble of the World Trade Center towers in September 2001. It was in 2013. At 2013, let's start that over again. Okay, so Lieutenant Frank Mara, now retired, was one of the police officers tasked with sifting through the rubble of the World Trade Center towers in September 2001. It was only in 2013, while conducting interviews for a 9/11 related book called Hallowed Ground, that he remembered encountering something paranormal during his long hours of work at the site. One of the detectives who was also being interviewed mentioned hearing about a ghostly tale of an old Red Cross worker that appeared to some of the officers while they were working. The woman tried to serve them coffee and sandwiches, as was the Red Cross's duty during World War II. Upon hearing the detective talk about this, Marrero remembered seeing a black woman dressed in a Red Cross uniform appearing several times while he worked. She had a tray of sandwiches, and she disappeared every time he strained to get a better look at her. There were several police officers who were also stationed at the site after the attacks claimed to have seen large shadows and black masses among the debris. After seeing a medium about his experience and hearing that he may have witnessed a soul collector guiding spirits to the hereafter, Mara truly believes that this is what he saw. Okay, number 8, failed poltergeist. Okay, in 1977, an unassuming house in England, in Enfield, made the news in a big way. It wasn't because of a crime or a missing child. Instead, Peggy Hodgson claimed that her house has been infiltrated by an evil entity. Hodgson claimed that her daughter, Janet, told her that her brother's beds were shaking and vibrating, and the next evening, Hodgson heard a loud noise coming from the children's bedroom. Upon investigating, she saw a chest of drawers moving by itself. She and the children were unable to move it back to the original place. In addition to all this, there was a strange knocking throughout the house, and Janet seemed to be able to levitate above her bed. The case eventually drew the attention of the famed paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. There was a lot of talk and accusations at the time, with many people believing that Hodgson and her children made the whole story up. However, at the same time that these arguments and conversations about the validity of the Enfield haunting were taking place, W.P. Carolyn Heaps signed an affidavit confirming that she had witnessed a paranormal event at Hodgson's home after being called out to her family, to help her family. He confirmed in her statement that he saw a hovering just off the floor before it moved a little over a meter, approximately 4 feet on its own. Afterward, the police left the house, stating they could not assist the family since there was no perpetrator breaking the law. Whether true or not, the events in the Enfield home were featured in the hit horror movie The Conjuring 2, which also features a scene where the police officers witness the chair moving on its own. Okay, so now we're going to do number 7 countdown. Capitol Theater haunting. Sheriff's Deputy Dave Murphy was a complete skeptic when he came to the paranormal. That is until he worked security in the Capitol Theater in Salt Lake City in 2012. Murphy was a guest on the sci-fi TV show Paranormal Witnesses, in which he detailed exactly what he and other officers had experienced during that time in the theater. Murphy rubbished all claims of the paranormal until he himself saw dark shadows moving through the walls one night. Then doors started to slam shut on their own while no one else was in the theater. Next, Murphy heard spectral voices and music, and eventually the specter itself appeared in the middle of the stage. On one occasion, Murphy even saw a woman dressed in clothing that dated back to the early 1900s. He claimed to have seen her walk right past him in the control room where he worked. Murphy also went on to say that eventually the shadows he saw the first time around wanted him out of the building and physically attacked him. Blair Fuller, the administrative manager of the Salt Lake County Center for the Arts, also experienced the paranormal going-ons in the building for himself, in the form of an elevator opening by itself and file doors opening and closing. Fuller believes that the main culprit haunting the theater is the ghost of a 17-year-old usher who died in a fire in 1947. Okay, here a little bit. Did you know that the kitty litter capital of the world is Quincy, Florida? Did you know about 60% of U.S. kids say they don't want to be like their parents? Did you know that George Washington's favorite tooth whitener was household chalk? Did you know aardvarks eventually stop growing, but teeth never do? Did you know that Christopher Columbus introduced lima beans to Europe? Interesting. Did you know, don't you think? Okay, so now we move on to number 6, which is the Silbury Hill Beings. An unnamed off-duty police sergeant was driving along a road near Silbury Hill in July of 2009 when he saw what looked like 3 forensic officers dressed in white coveralls standing in a field and staring at something on the ground. Stopping to investigate, he noticed that all 3 of the figures he was seeing were over 2 meters, 6 feet tall, and had blonde hair. While approaching them, he also heard what sounded like a static electricity reverberating throughout the field. When the officers noticed him, they took to their heels and they sprinted out of sight faster than any human would be able to. According to the sergeant, the 3 beings were inspecting crop circles that had appeared in the field just a few days earlier. After experiencing further paranormal activity, the sergeant decided to contact UFO experts, which led to crop circle researchers Andrew Russell and Colin Andrews investigating the incident on behalf of the terrified officers. The Wiltshire police station had no comment on the sighting, stating it was a personal matter because the sergeant was off duty at the time of the incident. Russell and Andrews, however, are convinced that the policeman saw something out of this world. Okay, number 5, and counting down. In 2015, 25-year-old Jennifer, and this is the mysterious voice, Jennifer Grosek was driving home with her 18-month-old toddler, Lily, when her car hit a cement barrier and crashed upside down in a river. A fisherman spotted the wreck in the water 14 hours later and immediately alerted the police. Officer Tyler Bill was one of the first to arrive at the scene, and when he spotted an arm through the window of the submerged car, he and 3 of his colleagues immediately jumped into the water to see if they could find survivors. At this point, all 4 of the men heard a woman's voice calling out to them. Feeling extremely motivated by the chance to save a life, the men pushed themselves to get to the car, only to find that Jennifer Grosek was dead and has been for some time. Lily was hanging upside down, fortunately, out of the reach of the freezing water, and the officers initially did not see her, but as soon as they were able to turn that car right side up, they saw the little girl and immediately got her out of the vehicle. Lily was unconscious, but her eyelids were fluttering, giving hope that she might make it out alive. She survived after being rushed to the hospital. The police officers don't know where the mysterious voice came from, but they credit it with motivating them to get to the water faster, which may have saved baby Lily's life. The number 4 is Don Decker and the Devil. In 1983, inmate Don Decker was on compassionate leave to attend his grandfather's funeral and was staying with family and friends in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Decker was washing his hands in an upstairs bathroom one evening when he suddenly became dazed and fell to the floor. When he came downstairs after the incident, Bob Kiefer asked him what had happened to him since he had deep scratches on his wrist. Decker told Kiefer of being in the bathroom and claimed to have had a vision of an old man wearing what appeared to be a crown. Not long after this, water started dripping from the roof of the walls. Kiefer called the landlord, thinking that the pipes on the property may have burst or been leaking somewhere. However, they realized that the pipes were located on the other side of the house and were not faulty. At this point, the water inside the house was falling down like rain, as well as leaking upward from the floor. Glancing at Decker, the 2 men saw that it seemed to be a trance-like state, and they immediately called the police. Things got progressively worse after they made the phone call, with Decker getting off the floor and being flung around the room and against the wall, all while new scratches were appearing on his body. Officer John Bojan and Officer Richard Wilbert arrived at the house, but while Bojan believed something paranormal was happening, Wilbert was not convinced and left the house without filing a report. The next day, 2 different officers defied Wilbert's orders and visited the house to see if they could figure out what was happening. William Davies and John Rundle claimed to have witnessed a gold horse burning Decker's skin, as well as a man being lifted off the ground and thrown across the room. When Decker was taken back to prison, some of the police officers on duty described water traveling up his cell walls and water with the consistency of a silicone appearing on a supervisor's shirt. A plumber was summoned to the police station, but he became visible and left right away to see what was happening inside Decker's cell. And most of the officers are fully convinced that Decker was possessed by the devil. giving him supernatural powers. Number 3, the Rendlesham Forest incident. Okay, in the week between Christmas and New Year's in 1980, James Peniston witnessed something strange in Rendlesham Forest while stationed at RAF Bentwaters. Peniston, senior security officer in charge at RAF Woodbridge, was the head of the police team called out to investigate an aircraft crash in the forest after unexplained lights were reported. Now, hold on, folks, getting a sip of coffee here. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll be doing the Rendlesham Forest incident. RAF Woodbridge was the head of the police team called out to investigate an aircraft crash in the forest after unexplained lights were reported. What he and 2 other officers found was nothing resembling a traditional aircraft. Instead, they found themselves faced with an unfamiliar craft resting on the ground on 3 legs. The craft was triangular in shape and fully intact. What happened next, as described by the man, was nothing short of paranormal. Peniston an official report containing claims that the radios malfunctioned in the presence of the strange craft. Blue and yellow lights were reflecting off its surface, and the air surrounding the craft crackled with electricity. After making notes of the symbols on the side of the craft and measuring it, the lights coming off sides of the craft's surface intensified. It then lifted soundlessly off the ground, made its way through the forest, and sped away at an incredible speed. At this point, there was nothing more than 80 police officers at the site, all of whom witnessed the craft and its takeoff. After the incident was reported, all personnel present at the site were warned not to discuss what they had seen, and the investigation was classified as a top secret. Okay, so interesting. Okay, we're down to number 2, the Indiana Demon House. In 2015, a police captain corroborated a story of a haunted house in Gary, Indiana, saying that he firmly believed that the house had something evil. The mother, Latoya Ammons, and the grandmother, Rosa Campbell, claimed that Ammons' 3 children were possessed by evil entities that were causing them to levitate and walk backward up a wall. Claims were also made of mysterious footprints appearing throughout the house, and eventually a photograph emerged that showed a figure inside the house's porch. This photograph was distributed by the local police department with a note that the house was empty at the time the picture was taken. The picture was later proven to be a hoax photograph taken from an effort to deter several people, including the captain, priests, and social workers, from insisting that the demons roamed the house. Psychics descended on the house and claimed that it was inhabited by more than 200 demons, all of whom were possessing the 3 children who lived there. The possession allegedly caused the kids' eyes to bulge out of their heads, their voices to deepen, and evil smiles to cross their faces. The family doctor was not convinced, however, saying that the children were displaying delusional behavior encouraged by their mother. The children were taken away for a short while, but the family had been reunited and now living in another house. They haven't reported any paranormal activity since. The Demon House was destroyed in January 2016 after it was purchased by Zach Boggins, executive producer of Ghost Adventures. Okay, we got down to number one. Maurice Frenchy, oh, this one's going to be difficult to pronounce, Theriault, had a difficult childhood after suffering abuse at the hands of his father and witnessing a terrible event in his family barn. The event has never been fully explained, but it is known that Frenchy had to participate in horrible acts after witnessing the unnamed event. As he grew older, Frenchy noticed strange abilities within himself, such as knowledge of things that he had never learned about and superhuman strength. He was deterred from joining the army by his father, causing him to leave the house and eventually settle in Warren, Massachusetts. But by 1985, Frenchy had married, and he and his wife lived on a farm in Warren. But all was not well in the Theriault household. Not only would blood appear randomly all over the house, but the couple began hearing voices and seeing things that would disappear without explanation. Unexplained fires broke out on the farm, and eventually Frenchy took his guns to the local sheriff and asked them to keep them for safety of himself and his wife. The events and Frenchy in one room of the house, but then appeared to his wife in another room. Trying to talk him or follow him would result in him disappearing from her view, and she would find him in the original room where he swore he had been all along. Several witnesses saw this happening, including a police officer from the local station. Eventually, Ed and Lorraine Warren were called in to assist, and in turn they sought the help of Bishop Robert McKenna to perform exorcism on Frenchy. Ed Warren almost died during the exorcism, but it was successful at the end. Frenchy's troubles continued. However, he was eventually arrested for sexual abuse of a minor. Okay, so we then have the 9 media-approved apparitions of the Virgin Mary. The apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico. Mary appeared 4 times to Juan Diego in 1531 at Tepeyac Hill near Mexico City. She proclaimed herself the spiritual mother of all mankind and left her miraculous image on Juan Diego's outer garment, his tilma. To this day, Mexicans have a great devotion of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Okay, folks, so that is the counting backwards from 10 events that I witnessed to, and we're going to come and take a little break now. And after the break, we will be talking about what is coming up for you. We'll talk about that one again, but we're going to see. I'm going to more ghosts. Okay, so we'll be right back.
Strikes by my window, hits my chest right in the morning, like a warning. Could have slept here for days. I felt your heartbeat, felt your mouth breathe, but it's not real. We were close to see the sun, but clouds got in our way, and so
out to people? Do you have services or products that are waiting to find the right client? You have come to the right place. Off the Cuff is dedicated to helping you make those important connections that allow energy to flow and empower both you and your company, as well as those seeking your quality services and products. Off the Cuff is not only a digital magazine or e-zine that highlights and showcases your authentic business, but can create things for you to use in your own spaces in the physical world and the internet. We create banners to fit your style and situations, logos, audio and video commercials, and so much more. Be sure to visit us at offthecuffezine.com and click on our Services tab. Peruse what our creative team has to offer, then connect with us to see how we can help you get yourself out there where your divine connections are waiting. Be sure to visit all of the areas of our website: blogs, radio shows, videos, and interactive live chat sessions. We are home to you and all who wish to connect with the same goals and life visions in mind. Are we unique from most others out there? Check us out and you decide. Off the Cuff, because, frankly, we are just folks wishing to empower you and who love each other as family here. Strictly off-the-cuff stuff. Off the Cuff, ezine.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Web Weavers. I'm your host, Sprinkles Nixon, and what we're doing today is we're doing some 10 countdowns of either ghost or events, paranormal events happening with the police. On the first half, we did the events that were happening that were witnessed by police officers. And this section now, part 2 of the show, I'm going to be talking about the 10 scientific explanations of famous ghostly phenomena. Also, please note that I'm sharing this with you from the xChronicles newspaper, and they have some really interesting stuff in there. So I thought these might be pretty good to kind of check out and see what we have here. So this is 10 scientific explanations for famous ghostly phenomena. According to a 2005 Gallup poll, 37% of Americans believed in haunted houses. And according to a 2013 Huffington Post YouGov poll, 45% believe in ghosts. These are surprising numbers, but the next time you hear a spooky sound, don't call the Ghostbusters. Get a scientist instead. Behind every shadow, poltergeist, and disembodied voice, there's a perfectly rational explanation. Okay, so now we have the electric stimulation of the brain. Frightened witnesses all over the world have seen the shadow people. These dark beings are glimpsed out of the corner of the eye and only to vanish when confirmed. Many believe them to be demons. Some think they're astral bodies, and some say they're time travelers, here for a second and gone. However, some researchers have more of a shocking theory. When Swiss scientists electrically stimulated an epileptic patient's brain, things got really spooky. The patient reported a shadow person sitting behind her, copying her every move. When she sat up, it also sat up. When she bent forward and grabbed her knees, it reached around her body and held her. The doctors then told her to read a card, but the shadow person tried to take it out of her hand. What happened was the scientists had stimulated left temporoparietal junction, the part of the brain that defines the idea of self, by interfering with the area that helps us tell the difference between ourselves and others. The doctors screwed up the brain's ability to understand its own body, thus leading to the creation of a copycat shadow person. Researchers are hoping this is the key stand that both schizophrenic and healthy encounter shadow beings and other creatures like aliens. Okay, number 9, the ideomotor effect. The ideomotor effect. The spiritualist movement was pretty big in the 1840s and the 1850s. It provided a way for people to talk to their dead loved ones. One method of communication was the Ouija board. Still popular today, the board was covered in letters, numbers, and simple words like yes or no. And people would then place their hands on a wooden piece called a planchet and ask the spirits a question. A ghost would respond by moving the planchet from letter to letter, spelling out a response. Or, howdy. Another creepy method for interacting with spirits was table tilting. During a seance, people would gather around a table and place their hands on the tabletop. To everyone's surprise, the table would stop moving by itself. It might tilt up on one leg, levitate off the ground in the room. Con men were definitely involved in some of these incidences, but all the encounters fraud? No. Renowned physicist Michael Faraday wanted to find out through clever experimentation. Faraday discovered that the tables were often moving thanks to the ideomotor effect. This is when the power of suggestion causes our muscles to move unconsciously. People expected a table to move, so they unintentionally moved it. A similar event took place in 1853 when 4 doctors held an experimental seance. When they secretly told half the participants that the table would move to the right and half it would move left, the table didn't budge. But when they told everyone it would move in one direction, the ideomotor effect struck again. This same principle applies to the Ouija board. It's our own muscles that are doing the spelling, not the spirits. I don't know about it. Okay, we'll see. Okay, number 8 is infrasound. After seeing a gray ghost near his desk, researcher Vic Tandy was worried about his laboratory might be haunted, but the next day, Tandy made an interesting discovery. While preparing for a fencing match, Teddy placed his sword in a vise. He then noticed that the blade was vibrating on its own. All of a sudden, everything clicked. He realized that the force causing his sword to shake was the same force haunting his lab. Vic Tandy was dealing with an infrasound. He hears up to 20,000 hertz, but we're unable to detect anything lower than 20 hertz. These silent noises are called infrasound, and while we can't hear them, we can feel them in the form of vibrations. Dr. Richard Wiseman says we can feel these waves, especially in our stomachs, and this can create either a positive feeling, such as awe, or a negative feeling, such as unease. In the right surroundings, this might create a sense of panic. Infrasound can be produced by storms, wind, weather patterns, and everyday appliances. Returning to Vic Tandy, after witnessing his wobbling sword, he learned that a new fan had been in his laboratory, and sure enough, it was issuing vibrations of frequency around 20 hertz. The infrasound was vibrating Tandy's eyeballs and creating images that weren't really there. When Tandy turned off the fan, presto, no more ghosts. Similarly, Dr. Weisman believes these vibrations are responsible for paranormal activity in haunted locations. For example, when investigating two underground sites, he discovered evidence of infrasound coming from the traffic overhead. Wiseman thinks this explains the ghostly figures and creepy footsteps in this area, proving there's nothing good about these vibrations. 7. Automatism. What do witch doctors and Shirley MacLaine have in common? They're all big into channeling. Channeling is one of mankind's oldest attempts to reach the spirit world. The idea is to clear the mind with some sort of cosmic consciousness and let century-old spirits possess your body, which doesn't sound creepy at all. The shamans of ancient religions were believed to channel the dead. TV psychic John Edwards says he can speak to those who've crossed over, and medium J.Z. Knight claims she channels a spirit named Ranta, a 35,000-year-old spirit from Atlantis. Obviously, there are quite a few frauds in the channeling community, but what about the people who sincerely believe in what they're doing? The answer is automatism, an altered state of consciousness, when people say things and think things they're not aware of. So when a psychic clears his mind and he starts searching for a friend's spirit guide, the spirit guide is supposed to enter his body and then provide secret knowledge about the universe. When the psychic clears his mind, random ideas and images start popping in his head, and the medium assumes these thoughts are coming from another entity. However, these ideas are just coming from his mind. Our brains are capable of coming up with all kinds of crazy stuff without any conscious effort on our part. How many times has something inspired you out of the blue? How many times have you had totally bizarre nightmares or daydreams that's not work of another otherworldly guide? That's your brain working overtime all the time. Okay, so here we are. Next one is drafts. Okay, you're exploring a creepy, rundown mansion in the middle of the night when suddenly the air grows cold. However, if you take a few steps to the left or right, the temperature returns to normal. This is what parapsychologists call a cold spot. According to ghost hunters, a cold spot is a sign of paranormal activity. When a ghost has nothing better to do than appear out of thin air and scare people to death, it needs energy, so the ghost draws heat from its surroundings, including people, in order to manifest. However, scientists have a much simpler and much more boring explanation. When skeptics investigate haunted houses, they usually find a cool air entering the house through a chimney or a window. But even if the room is sealed off, there's still a perfectly rational explanation. Every object has its own temperature, and some surfaces are hotter than others. In an attempt to equalize the room, the object tried to lose heat in a process called convection. This is where the hot air rises and cool air drops. Similarly, when dry air enters a humid room, the dry air sinks to the floor and the humid air rises to the ceiling. This swirling air will feel cool against a person's skin, giving the impression of a cold spot. Next time you feel a ghostly presence, turn on the heater. Okay, so ghost hunters have a love-hate relationship with orbs. These glowing balls of light are supposedly the spirits of people who've passed away, but haven't quite passed on. Invisible to the eye, orbs can only be seen in photographs, and that's where things get tricky. Skeptic Brian Dunning says When a dust speck or a bug is too close to the camera, it will show up in the photo as a blurring out of focus circle. And thanks to the camera flash, the orb will appear to be glowing and is thus mistaken for a perfectly reasonable mistake, right? Even most believers are pretty skeptical about orb photography. While she thinks some real photos exist, parapsychologist Pamela Heath points out several natural causes of orbs, such as fine hairs, dirty or wet lenses, lens reflection, or movement during exposure. Many paranormal websites have stopped accepting these photos because they say there are just too many false ones. So thanks to a basic understanding of how technology works, orb photos seem to be getting up close. Okay, number 4 is carbon monoxide poisoning. In 1921, ophthalmologist William Wilmer published a bizarre paper in the American Journal of Ophthalmology. It told the story of the H family and their haunted house. Oh, the names didn't get me. Of the house, Hellhome, was plagued with the sounds of slamming doors, moving furniture, and footsteps in an empty room. One of the children felt something sitting on him while the other was attacked by a mysterious stranger. During the night, the woman of the house awoke to see a man and a woman standing at the foot of her bed, only to watch them vanish moments later. As the hauntings continued, the family grew tired and depressed, and their plants started to die. It was then they discovered the faulty furnace. The furnace was supposed to send its fumes up the chimney, but instead the gas was pouring into the house. It turns out the family was suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide, the CO, is an odorless colored gas which makes it really hard to detect. It's dangerous because our red blood cells absorb CO much easier than they do oxygen, and this oxygen deprivation leads to symptoms such as weakness, nausea, confusion, and eventually death. But before you kick the bucket, you might experience hallucinations just like the H family. For example, 2005, a woman called the authorities after seeing a spirit in her bathroom. It turned out the paranormal activity was due to her leaky water heater, which was filling the house with CO. Bottom line, stay away from carbon monoxide, folks, because one way or another, it'll have you. Okay, number 3, mass hysteria. In June 2013, over 3,000 workers went on strike at a garment factory in Bangladesh. They weren't protesting against long working hours, and they weren't demanding better wages. They wanted someone to do something about the ghost in the restroom. An angry spirit had attacked a worker in the ladies' room, causing everyone to panic. A riot ensued, and the police had to restore order. A similar event took place at a school in Phuket, Patong, Phuket, when 22 students were hospitalized after seeing ghosts of an old woman. But while the Bangladeshi factory owner ordered an exorcism, perhaps he should have called a counselor instead. Both the workers and the students experienced a psychological phenomenon known as mass hysteria. These collective delusions occur when people are really stressed out, usually thanks to the oppressive environments like a strict school or a busy workplace. This pent-up stress then turns into physical symptoms like headaches, nausea, or violent spasms. Throw in religious and cultural beliefs, a relatively isolated environment, and the always busy rumor mill, and you've got a recipe for disaster. other people catch the same strange symptoms, they'll spread like a disease and panic ensues. It's interesting to note that very few of the 3,000 factory workers actually encountered the ghost. Even the woman who sparked their frenzy didn't actually see anything. She got sick and just assumed it was the work of an evil spirit. But the suggestion was so powerful and the circumstances were so perfect that everyone freaked out. Fortunately, it didn't end with a human sacrifice or dogs and cats living. Number two, we're down to number two. Ions. Unfortunately, real ghost hunters don't carry proton packs. However, they do use tools such as the ion counter. The ion counter, counts ions, and an ion is an atom with an uneven amount of protons and electrons. If an atom gains an electron, it becomes a negative ion, and if it loses an electron, it becomes positive. Ghost hunters go crazy over ions because they supposedly show paranormal presence, saying a spirit's presence interferes with the normal ion count in the atmosphere, while others say ghosts draw upon ionic energy when they want to appear and scare people to death. However, ion counters are really pretty lousy when it comes to detecting ghosts. Ions are caused by all kinds of natural phenomena like weather, solar radiation, radon gas. So it basically comes down to how someone interprets the evidence. Scientists and ions and think natural ghost hunters see ions and think paranormal. Interestingly, both positive and negative ions can affect our moods. Negative ions can make us feel calm and relaxed, while positive ions can give us headaches and make us feel lousy. This might explain why people who live in haunted houses describe things quite intense, as well as having headaches. Okay, number one, quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is the study of the smallest type of matter, and it has led to some pretty awesome inventions. However, it can get pretty weird when physicists start talking about souls and ghosts. Take, for example, Dr. Stuart Hameroff and his physicist friend Roger Penrose. Hameroff and Penrose theorized that the human consciousness comes from microtubules inside our brain cells, and these tubules are responsible for quantum processing. Our souls, basically, Hameroff and Penrose believe, when people have a near-death experience, all that quantum information leaves the brain, yet continues to exist, which is why some people report out-of-body experiences and lights at the end of the tunnel. As you might expect, a lot of problems with Hameroff and Penrose theory, but Dr. Henry Stapp isn't one of them, as he respected quantum physicists who worked with the famous Heisenberg. Stapp believes that a person's personality might be able to survive death and exist as a mental entity. Stapp theorizes that if these entities could return to the physical world, then concepts like possession and channeling could really be possible. Are men like Sarah Hameroff and Penrose just wishful thinkers, or are they the modern-day Galileo? Well, I hope that you enjoyed our little session here, and it's just about coming up to the end. I want to remind you that we have some classes and courses taking place at and through the OTC, offthecuffdesign.com, and we also have some special events coming up. We are returning to having the reading nights, and it's going to be on Fridays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that would be 5 p.m., I believe, Pacific Time. So come check us out. We have a few things going on. We look forward to helping you, and we really enjoyed sharing this little bit of you. It makes you kind of think. So that's why I shared the two top tens of paranormal phenomenon and such. So do take care. I hope to see you next week. Well, tune in and listen, because we will be here. All right. Love and light, everybody.
So close, and I don't wanna take you traveling the world, but I can love you. Yeah, I'm gonna love you. I'll give you all of what I've got. The fancy finds, baby, I have not. Just gonna love you. Yeah, I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna love you, baby. Cross my heart and hope to die. Just gonna love you. Yeah, I'm gonna love you. Just gonna love you. Yeah, I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna love you, babe. Cross my heart and hope to die.